Welcome to the Interesting Lawyers Podcast. This is your host, Russ Adler. And today we have yet another interesting guest. Please welcome Mark Eiglarsh. Mark Eiglarsh is a 31-year criminal lawyer, practices in South Florida, very high-profile guy, handles a lot of high-profile cases, and is a frequent commentator to pretty much every news outlet you can imagine. CNN, HLN, CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox, The Today Show, Good Morning America, Dr. Phil, Nancy Grace. Oh, I remember her. You've been on even The View. Wow. So, Mark.
I was a guest co-host of that show. Is that insane?
Oh, man. Mark, to what do I owe this honor?
Well,
my little podcast.
Well, it's about friendship, my friend. When you ask me to do something, I do it. You're a good, decent human being, and so why not? And by the way, it sounded weird when you said it right, but you said 31-year lawyer. A lot of people are thinking, I'm hoping that he's only 31 and that maybe I haven't been practicing for 31 years, but that's unfortunately the case. I'm actually 50, almost 6, I think, which is
amazing.
Insane.
Yeah. I don't know how you kept all your hair, but why ask why? And I'm happy for you because you always look great when I see you and you're always happy. And we're going to talk about the whole happiness thing in a few minutes.
Sure.
But before that, you've been all over the news lately because you represented a deputy sheriff here in Broward County who was working at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School on the date of that terrible mass shooting a few years ago. You represented a guy called Deputy Peterson, and all I could tell you is I kind of expected a guilty verdict, and people who I spoke to about it kind of thought it was a bit of a foregone conclusion, but somehow you pulled a rabbit out of a hat and you walked the guy on a not guilty verdict. So first of all, just from lawyer's point of view, congratulations. I mean, you made sure that the guy got a fair trial, and you obviously got a great result given the facts in that case, which really touched a lot of nerves of a lot of people, and rightfully so. So my basic understanding of it was this crazy kid breaks in and is shooting everybody while Deputy Peterson is sitting downstairs in his car. He never gets out of his car. He never goes up, confronts anybody. And then he took the hit, at least in the media and from public officials. He was like the fall guy, it seemed. So Can you fill us in on exactly how you were able to pull that off and really what evidence there was that we may not be, the listeners might not be aware of, that explains that not guilty verdict that you got?
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I didn't even want to meet with Scott Peterson when he wanted me to represent him. I had already been representing one of the victims in the case, Alea Eastman, a very courageous young woman who used one of her classmates' bodies to hold over her to shield her from the bullets that were entering her classroom. He had already perished, and she felt a lot of guilt for doing that. She was looking for me to possibly sue. And I said, listen, there's other lawyers who are suing. You want to turn this into a positive and be an advocate for change, I'm here to help you. And I still to this day mentor her. She is extraordinary. So the last thing I wanted to do was represent this alleged coward. But I met with him. And after he discussed what really happened, not what the media was portraying, but what really happened, I said, listen, if half of what you're telling me is true, then you have been thrown under the bus by former Sheriff Israel, and I will definitely defend you. And sure enough, I read, for example, the dispatch, what he's saying in real time, the transcript of that. And you hear him asking officers, where's the shooter? Where's the shooter? You hear him doing things in real time that never got reported by the media. Things that show that he really, number one, didn't know precisely where the shooter was located, but more importantly, he was doing things like sending the assistant principal to the office to go look at video surveillance to try to find out where the shooter was located.
Why didn't he get out of his car and go look for the shooter?
He wasn't in the car. He was, what they allege, was behind a cement wall, cowering, Well, first of all, that when the first shots rang out, they came from over 75 yards away. The pronounced echo and reverberation caused him and other students and teachers to believe erroneously that the shots were coming from a completely different direction, from the football field, from the parking lot area, from the soccer field, from here, from it. No one knew precisely where the shots were coming from. Their case, the state's case was all premised on this erroneous assumption that he knew, there's a shooter killing kids in that building. Just the opposite. Numerous officers who heard the same shots, numerous students and teachers thought that the shots were coming from hundreds of yards away in completely different directions. We had two gals from the same family testify. They were right near each other. They testified that one heard shots all the way, in one direction, and one heard shots from, same DNA, hearing the same bullets, couldn't tell where the shots were coming from. So what he does is what he's trained to do. You take a tactical position of cover and you wait to find out more information so you know where to even run. In hindsight, okay, I'll just run in one direction, which is silly because if the shooter or shooters then jump in the opposite direction and start shooting kids, you've now taken yourself out of play. And what happened was all the calls that from students inside the 1200 building saying, there's a guy shooting up the building. He's in this classroom specifically. All those calls went to Coral Springs. Coral Springs did not share that real-time intelligence with BSO, with Broward Sheriff's Office. So my client's sitting there with a phone, a radio, by the way, that was defective. They all conceded their radios were useless. But the information that Coral Springs had was never relayed to my client. All the Coral Springs officers erroneously thought when they arrived on scene that my client knew all the information that they had. So to sacrifice my client like Sheriff Israel did is still extremely reprehensible. And it troubles me to this day. And the not guilty verdict, which to me was the obvious outcome, and I take exception. I know you didn't mean it when you said you pulled a rabbit out of a hat. You meant I did a great job and I worked hard on the case. Not
Well, that was the optic. Yeah.
I understand, but I take this very seriously. My client was always innocent. He's still innocent. And to this day, it bothers me that he does not get the accolades for doing what he did in real time to try to save lives. Instead, he gets condemned and he had to move out of the state.
So it was a miscommunication, really, or a failure to communicate from the Coral Springs Police Department to BSO to pull that together. And by the way, what was wrong with the radios? You said they were all defective or they all had a problem.
Every single person, this was beyond all doubt, proven in this case, that it was like having a brick in their hands. They just failed. There was too many people using it all at once. They have since, I heard, changed their system. But at the time, you couldn't hear things. Officers were trying to get out information that could have been helpful to my client, but they'd get a honking noise instead. It was useless. So without that communication, you set my client up for failure. And Sheriff Israel knew that would all fall on his shoulders, whether it was right or wrong. So what he did at that famous press conference is, well, I give you Scott Peterson on a silver platter. You can't teach courage. He should have gone in to kill the killer. Well, easy for you to say. You had my client's cell phone number because you guys were friends. Why didn't you call him first to find out what he knew and what he didn't know? No, that wouldn't have served his interest well.
Right. And do you believe there was some sort of political angle to this because of, was he running for re-election at the time, Sheriff Israel?
I think this whole prosecution was political. You also have, let's talk about the families for a second. I was very respectful and very loving to those families who my family wrote hand notes to when this first happened 6 years ago. We sat around the table and we normally do our gratefuls and we say what we're grateful for, but we were all filled with sorrow. So we all agreed we would handwrite notes to each of the families affected, my wife included. My wife's extraordinary. What an empath she is. These beautiful, lovely seeds of happiness, these ceramic smiley faces. We sent that to the family members. I was so, I believe, loving throughout this trial. It was never about us versus them. However, that was a huge force that pushed this prosecution along in spite of when the prosecutor and I would take depositions and it was clear that you couldn't tell where the shots were coming from. We called dozens of witnesses. We could have called dozens more who heard the same shots he did, and you couldn't tell from that echo and reverberation. But the prosecution still went on. My client was facing a life sentence and nothing could derail it. I met with the state attorney, Harold Pryor. There's nothing that they could do. I understood the political pressure they were under.
So, Mark, my thought is very simple. There's been even one school shooting is way too many.
Sure.
Why don't they just make schools like airports where, you can only walk in through one entrance. There's a metal detector, the people, the police there, just like, everybody's familiar with that. Why don't they have that at schools? Or if they're thinking about it, when's that going to happen? Any info on that?
I'm no expert on it, but I certainly defer to the families who lost loved ones at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and I applaud them because they have made it a mission to make significant changes to make schools safer, and I believe that they're doing that. I think changes have already come about because of their efforts, and I'm hoping that it becomes more difficult for abhorrent monsters to commit acts like Nicholas Cruz did.
So I know that the shooter, Cruz, skirted the death penalty but got life with no parole, right?
That didn't help us, by the way. I mean, the pound of flesh wasn't gotten from him getting the death penalty. He got life. So that then again increased the pressure on getting venom and getting a conviction for my client. It was rough.
And what about the shooter's mother? I know that there was some discussion, at least, about holding the mother accountable for what the son did. Whatever became of that?
Well, nothing. And it reminds me of this Jennifer Crumbly case where in Michigan, the mother of a school shooter was held responsible. Both her and the husband were arrested. And I spoke very publicly on Fox News and a number of other outlets that while in theory I get the concept, and I think certain parents should be held accountable, I still feel to this day that the facts didn't warrant it. The true facts, not the misreporting of the facts. But I saw her testimony. I watched all the hours of direct examination and cross, and I believe at the core, she wasn't the best mother. She certainly wasn't the best wife with all of her affairs, but I will tell you this, she did not to the core reasonably believe that her son was going to be shooting up that school. And I think that's the difference between a civil lawsuit and a criminal lawsuit, which requires criminal negligence. And I don't think that was there, but the jurors found otherwise. So,
Wow. Well, certainly your case was probably on their mind as they were deciding that, too many similarities.
maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
really, really interesting.
I
Wow.
could share with you this, by the way. This is one of the greatest moments of my life. I was talking with friends recently. I was skiing, and I posed the hypothetical: what moment would you love to relive in your life? And this is it. I expected a not guilty verdict from beginning to end. In fact, every time the prosecutor came over to talk to me, I was hopeful that he would say, "All right, we're done. We're going to drop the charges." I was that delusional. I was so focused on acquittal that I never explored the possibility of him being convicted. That's just how that's how I treat my cases. I get laser focused on something.
Yep.
But the reason why I became so emotional is because the jurors were out like 3 or 4 days over like 20 hours. I couldn't believe that they were taking so long. So I broke down. I got so emotional because it was torture. Every day that this went on, you were going, "Oh my God, what is happening here?" And so look, I wouldn't have changed it for the world, but in the moment, trust me, I wanted them to come back quickly.
It's a real nail biter. And I know that sometimes when verdicts come down, there's always, like JFK once said, you can't please all of the people all of the time. Did you
Sure.
get any blowback from people who were unhappy about the verdict, any threats
Sure.
or things like that?
Oh yeah, no, I let a lot of the threats go until one became really specific, and that's when I alerted the police department where I live and had the roaming police, kind of keep a closer eye on my family. I never told my wife. I didn't want her to be affected by it. But yeah, there was definitely some concerns about that, and my heart goes out. Listen, this was not easy. I knew that by having my client acquitted, that would bring great sorrow to many people, especially people who lost loved ones. But as I've always said, you don't do justice for the victims by doing an injustice against Scott Peterson. And that's what they were trying to do.
Right. Or as I used to say to juries in civil cases, in rebuttal, half a glass of justice is half a glass of injustice.
I like it.
So, yeah. But truly a no-win situation. But, obviously you did an admirable job there. And, I commend you for doing a great job as a lawyer. Again, it's kind of a thankless profession, oftentimes. I mean, I for one know how hard it is to prepare for any trial. I
Yeah.
agree with you that, to be a great lawyer, not only do you have to believe in your case, but you have to be passionate about it and you have to be committed to it. And it
Sure.
sounds to me like you were really all in on this one.
So what has helped me in the spiritual arena, that helped me in the professional arena, is I got to a point in my life where I truly live the expression, what people think of me is none of my business. It's what I think of myself. And I knew what I needed to do for 3.5 years to properly prepare for Peterson. Okay. And I prepared for that case the same way I do everything in my life. I always think of the worst case scenario and say, all right, if I could do it all over again, how would I do it the first time? If I could do it all over again, how would I do it? And I do it that way the first time, is my point. So I prepared zealously every day. This was on my mind. Every day I was preparing. And I can't control that people take exception to the outcome. I can tell you, though, that most of the ones who do didn't fully watch the trial. If they watched each of our defense witnesses and they watched the testimony and they watched my cross-examination, which is available, by the way, you go to YouTube, put in Mark Eiglarsh, Scott Peterson trial, you can watch the trial. And then you get a better idea of what the facts truly are.
Yeah, but how many people have gone and watched that? I know it's available, but
Surprisingly, a lot. I get approached by a lot of people. There's a judge in Broward County who comes up to me all the time. She goes, my husband's such a fan. He watched the whole trial. Maybe they didn't go back and watch it. And some people have watched at least the closing arguments. But a lot of people watch that in real time. I was very surprised. I was in my own little world. But a lot of people did. And those people get it. They know. You don't, listen, I comment on a lot of cases. And I know that on some level, I might be doing an injustice because I'm not there watching it. Even the Crumbly case, I have my feelings, but maybe I'm missing something. I concede. I wasn't there in the courtroom for the whole time, and I defer to those jurors,
Yeah.
Same with Peterson. People don't know. They don't know. Unless you were there, you don't know what the facts are. And the media, God bless them, they do the best they can, but they've got a minute and a half, and it remotely mirrors the truth of what really went on.
Well, the media, their challenge is they have to cater to the ever declining attention span of the public.
Yeah.
My observation is that with each new generation, and probably a lot because of social media and conditioning and, the whole TikTok thing, the 1 minute focus followed by the next 1 minute or whatever it is, or maybe there's more cognitively than I'm giving credit to for that. But there's just a lot being thrown at the public, and it just makes it ripe for misunderstandings. And
I agree with you. I'm gonna throw in something I've never said because I've discussed the Peterson case on a number of podcasts, and I'm gonna throw something out there for your viewers that I have not told anyone. So I was very disappointed because here I am learning what the facts truly are, and then reading reports, including the Washington Post, New York Times, CNN. They were all just getting it wrong. So I reached out personally to each of the reporters and I said, do you care about the truth? And of course, I figured they'd all say yes. I go, well, I'm willing to meet with you face to face. You come down here, meet my office. I will tell you and show you how you're getting it wrong. Now, and they all took me up on it. So either on Zoom or personally, I had probably 5 to 10 reporters sitting in my office and I went through the facts before the trial. My secondary goal was to see if I can affect their articles, to see if I can get them to write the truth. But do you know what the secret goal was also? I was using them on our shoestring budget to use them as mock jurors. The more I laid out the facts for them, I was practicing for trial. I used them. Now, it was beneficial to them. They got to hear about the facts, but it certainly helped me. It became effortless to use my visual aids and to show them the evidence as if I was spoon-feeding jurors. It became very effective because once I got into the courtroom, I was ready. I knew exactly the best way to present the facts.
It's fascinating. So what's the one thing that stands out in your mind that you learned from these journalists slash mock jurors that might have been right in front of you, but you just didn't really see it until you met with them? Anything?
Yeah, I think that they all jumped to the second point, which was, yeah, I can't believe they're going after a cop for inactivity. And I said, wait, you're burying the lead. He didn't know where the shots were precisely coming from. That's the first thing. We don't get to, okay, he knew it was coming from the 1200 building, but then he took a position of cover because that's how he was trained, or he thought he should do that. And he wanted to wait for the cavalry to come with, the vests and the real guns. No, that's not what he did. That's what I thought he did from the media reports. But he was trying to figure out in real time precisely where those shots were coming from. The first shots that he heard when he got on the scene was from all the way the other side of the building. This building was 75 yards long. It's huge. And the door was open and Cruz was shooting in the opposite direction towards a football field. So he reasonably believed the shots were coming from potentially the football field. He also thought maybe the 1200 building, maybe the 1300 building, maybe the parking lot. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards to possibly cover. And he just didn't know. So that's the point they didn't get that the jurors did, fortunately.
Wow. There's a lot I didn't know either.
Yeah.
So please tell me that law enforcement has changed their protocols for active shooters, at least in school situations where some of the most vulnerable people are.
Well, I'll tell you this: the policy when my client was working for BSO was that during an active shooting, you may engage the shooter. May, because you don't want to go on you don't want your officers going on a suicide mission, and other reasons why you may. They changed it to shall after. So now officers hear shots, no matter what, you have to go in. Okay.
Right. But you said he didn't know. He didn't know.
I know. So it wouldn't have made a difference, but they think it would have, But it is interesting how he got prosecuted when his own policy said you may confront the shooter. It's very interesting. So even if he knew, the argument is, but I didn't push that in front of the jury because I don't want them to think, well, he knew where the shooter was, but then fell on this little technicality. That's not what happened.
Yeah. Wow. So Mark, I met you a while back, actually through personal connections, not professionally, because I always did civil. You've always been a criminal lawyer. But the one thing that I always identified with you about, and I felt we were birds of a feather, is that we both loved what we did. It's a very stressful profession.
Sure.
You never know what kind of cases you're going to get or who's going to walk in the door. You have to run an office. There's a lot there and a lot of stress handling these cases. In your case, with people's liberty and freedom on the line, and sometimes they're actually found guilty and sometimes they're not. But you always loved what you do, and I've always admired that about you. So with that said, can you tell us what gave you the impetus to write your book? And if you could show the book to our listeners who might be watching on YouTube, and then tell them about it, because we've got a lot of podcast people too.
All right. So the book is called Be Happy by Choice, Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back. And it can be found on behappybychoice.com. I never wanted to write a book. I certainly didn't want to go public with my victim story. I didn't want to bleed on the pages. I did it because I had to. And by that, I mean, in life, we all experience pain. They say pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? I was going through a lot of pain a long time ago, some personal challenges that I had, and work also. I found myself on a roller coaster. Like, I'm happy 1 minute because I got the verdict I wanted, but then a judge would treat me poorly, or a prosecutor would be nasty or not return my phone calls like one is doing right now, and it's driving me nuts. And I would then be like on a roller coaster, up, down, up, down. My kids didn't know which dad would walk through the door. Generally I was a happy fella, but I was affected by whether somebody chose to cut me off in traffic, whether somebody treated me with love and respect. And I said no more. I said, I want to choose to be happy regardless of the facts and circumstances around me. Now that's tough because I don't live on a mountaintop with a shaved head wearing a toga. I'm in the real world battling it out. So what did I do? Everything. If there was a seminar, I went to it. If there was a book that had happiness in the title, I read it. I went out to the Deepak Chopra Wellness Center in Carlsbad, California, the sweet spot of the universe, to learn more, to be a better meditator, to whatever I can get. And I put all the things that I learned together, and I started to use these tools, focusing on gratitude, love, service, things that I knew would make me happier. And from that, it started to work. I was actually happier. And it's not that I still, and to this day, it's not that I'm not triggered, I am. But I know right away when I'm feeling dis-ease. And if you say that quickly, it's disease. When you're not at ease, you are literally ready, increasing the chances of a heart attack, a stroke. So I don't want to suffer for a second unless I choose to. So when I feel dis-ease, I immediately go into some of the tools that I talk about in the book, and I use them myself. I'll do a gratitude list right then and there. I'll pull out a sheet of paper and start writing every single thing for which I'm most grateful. That I got up this morning. You know how many people didn't? That I just took a breath. I just took a breath. That my kids are alive, that I go through everything. And then all of a sudden I feel better. That's just one of the many tools that I use. And from that, I am able to not change the people around me because I'm powerless over them, but I can change my reaction to them. That's the shortest version. I change my thoughts to change how I feel, to change how I act and show up.
So how was the book worked out for you? I'm not asking particularly how many copies you sold or how much money you made, but more about, I know you've had speaking engagements, you've done webinars and things like that. Tell us a little bit about that and who's your audience. It's because, this is something that really doesn't just apply to lawyers.
Right.
It applies to anybody.
So first of all, while I've probably made decent money doing keynote addresses, although that is clearly not my motivation, I give away my speeches too, depending upon the group, right? My target audience is everyone. The book, I don't think I made any money because after it was 300 pages, I said, you know what? No one's going to read a 300-page book. That will make people unhappy. So I got a new editor and I said, what about 200 pages? We whittled it down. And I said, you know what? A lean filet mignon. Yes, I'm cutting out a lot of stuff, but if we can make it about 100 pages or so, and it turned out to be at 110 pages, then people could actually read it. They'll feel good about themselves. I just wanted them to read the book. And people do. They take a few hours. They go, Mark, it changed my life. If you're open to it, it does change your life. What were your other questions? I think I
Have
answered.
you considered doing any sorts of courses or continuing education?
Yeah, I'd love to do more. It's just a question of I haven't figured out a way to make more than 24 hours in a day and 7 days of the week. So it's just a question of having balance. So I do as much as I can. I love the speaking gigs because I can hit a room full of, 100 to 1,000 people, or 20 people. It doesn't matter to me. As long as I'm making a difference and people are open to it, I love it. So I'd love to do more. I'd love to do, that's what I want. I want to just be of service. Selfishly, it makes me feel good. And I believe everybody's birthright is happiness. I do believe that we're born happy. I used to not think that. I said, well, some people are born assholes and then, they just continue to be assholes. No, I strongly believe that if you look at any toddler, right, as long as their basic needs are met, they have an empty diaper, they got a full belly, decent environment, they're happy as can be. What happens is they download thoughts that do not serve them well. And then they either, and they face trauma or whatever, and they become what we call assholes. But they're really just people who have had challenges in their life and now hurt people. So what I try to do is show as much love and understanding, and I separate the doer from the deed. I might not like the person's behavior, but that person is nothing but love and light. Their behavior, I don't necessarily love, and I try to distance myself from people who are going to trigger me.
Wow. Well, by definition, lawyers help people solve their problems. I always took an interest in my clients. I'm still in touch with a few former clients from 10 plus years ago. And how about you? Have you stayed in touch with any of your clients and made a difference in their lives or with their families?
Yes. And I will tell clients like they want to give me a bonus or a gift when I get amazing outcomes that change their lives. I say, no. I want one thing from you. Just on the anniversary of this verdict or this plea that we got or the charges being dropped, just call me or drop me a note. And it reminds me of so many cases that I just forget because I move on. I get an amazing outcome for a 20-year-old whose entire future could be derailed if charges are actually filed or if a jury says one word as opposed to two. And being able to play an active role in preventing an injustice from happening is enormous. And so all I want is a reminder of that if possible. They don't have to, and some don't, but it's just very rewarding to be brought back to some miraculous outcomes that changed the course of many lives, not just the defendants.
So why is it, from your point of view, why so many lawyers hate what they do? They don't, they don't like what they do. They hate what they do. They complain about it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of negativity. From my point of view, I always loved what I do. I always had a smile on my face. That's just the kind of person I am, and I just enjoyed it. And I even took sport in being able to litigate and try cases. What is your take on the collective unhappiness
Yeah.
in the legal profession? So many people tell me I'm envious of you because you don't practice and you seem to be doing well and you're happy, and I feel bad for them.
So I can answer this as an expert because I was both a very unhappy lawyer and today I'm an extremely happy and grateful. And I've gone through, peaks and valleys. So when I was unhappy, it was because I chose thoughts that did not serve me well, right? The average person has about 50,000 thoughts a day. 80% of them are thoughts that do not serve you well. And 90% of the thoughts that we had yesterday are the same thoughts we're having today and the same ones we're going to have tomorrow. So the goal was I had to change the thoughts that I was embracing. I don't take everything from the buffet line. I take what I like and leave the rest. So that was the first thing, selecting the thoughts, the ones where you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not worthy, you're not fill in the blank that we all have as human beings. I started to let those go. Hey, brain, that I call Biff. I tell people to name their brain. So mine is Biff. I say, Biff, I laugh. I go, I know what you're doing. You're sending me thoughts that don't serve me well. No, stop. Send me better thoughts. So that's number one. Number two is I change the thoughts about my profession. Yes, one way to look at it is, my goodness, I am overwhelmed with people's problems. I mean, they pay me to take on their problems. Some are facing life sentences right now. It is brutal. And I know I'm the one that is responsible for the outcome. It could be brutal. Or I flip that, like I do everything. And that is, I am privileged and so grateful to be able to be a champion for my client's liberty. I'm going to do everything in my power to get that client the best outcome. However, I don't control the outcome. And when I thought that I did, that made me nuts. When I thought I needed to be responsible for the outcome, that made me nuts. And I still have to go through that today, where I find myself uncomfortable and I go, wait, hold on one second, Mark. You didn't kill anybody. You didn't operate an illegal gambling, parlor. You didn't fill in the blank. Just do your best, Mark. That's all you can do, so you won't then pull out the proverbial stick and metaphorically slam myself over the head like we all do all the time when we think we don't get the outcome that we wanted.
Yeah. And, I agree with everything you said. These days I work with lawyers, I work with a lot of younger lawyers, and I do a lot of mindset coaching. And if everybody had your mindset, the profession would probably be a whole lot better and a whole lot different. So perhaps I can invite you back or to one of my programs I'm putting together designed for young lawyers, because one thing that I've noticed is that for the past 3 years since COVID, everything has gone to remote, right? To Zoom. And at least, in my time, and certainly in your time pre-COVID, I was all about going to the courthouse, going to depositions, going to mediations, the live one-on-one interactions, going to lunch with lawyers I liked, but getting to know and planting the seeds of these relationships that, including yours, by the way, right, with you, that continue to pay off. And I just wonder about these young lawyers, 3 years and less. Some of them have actually never been to a live hearing or a live deposition or mediation.
Yeah.
And plus, a lot of their colleagues at the firm, including people they work for, they're on Zoom as well. You ever try to train somebody on Zoom? So I'm just asking you, from the other side of the courthouse, what are your observations about these young lawyers, these Gen Z lawyers who have these generational challenges? I don't want to stereotype, but also have had to face COVID and deal with it, because I think it's really an insidious problem that lurks below the surface. People don't think about it very much. And that's something that I really try to promote awareness of and try to work with lawyers to make up for it as much as possible. Thoughts?
I think you're right on point. I think it is a big problem. And so I try to be part of the solution. So last night, even though I was swamped training for a half marathon, I don't have extra time, but I went down to St. Thomas Law School for a couple of hours to mentor law students and invited all of them to shadow me because they had an interest in criminal law, and at least one already responded. She's coming with me to court on Monday. She will be there. I will give her a top-notch experience. She'll understand exactly what we're there for. I'll take her around and show her what it's like to be a criminal lawyer. I did this a few weeks ago at NSU Law School. For me personally, I also loved COVID in one respect because I didn't have to go to court, but that also made me like distant. It made me, away from people. And so I'm changing that up. It's part of the reason why I just became a big brother through Big Brothers Big Sisters again, so I can have contact, take my little brother out, meet people. It's why I put in to be a professor again. I used to be down at Law, but it was too far to drive. So now I just got word yesterday I'm actually going to be teaching their trial advocacy over at St. Thomas.
Oh,
I'm thrilled because then I get to give back to people on the front lines, invite them to come with me. And it's not just about me. Selfishly, that all makes me feel good. But I know I'm making a difference. I'm helping people.
Yeah, I know in criminal, they're pretty much back to live appearances, and a lot of that is because the defendant is required to personally be present at
But
proceedings.
not all. Listen, I still get away with Zoom at more than half of the time. I don't go down to Miami all that often. And Broward, like today I went, but just because it had been a while and let me just go see everybody. But no, you'll be surprised how many are still using Zoom and how many clients' appearances we can waive or have them just jump on Zoom also if the judge were to ask. So it's still a very distant practice in some respects. You still do it from afar.
And on the civil side, it's almost completely still all Zoom for everything. I know it's discretionary. Some judges can have live hearings, but it's just kind of sad. I've made a few videos from these barren, empty halls of these beautiful courthouses. There's no one's there. Now, granted, on the civil side, there are probably people on the criminal side, but the whole point is, I just think it's a case of arrested development.
I wanted to add something. I agree with you. I wanted to add something. I just got to download regarding a question you asked earlier and why people are so unhappy. If you go through life by default, meaning you wake up, you don't have a plan, and then you're looking outward and hoping that external forces, either people you come in contact with or things you consume or experiences you have, is going to be the key to your happiness. I've done that. That doesn't work in the long run. It just doesn't.
A goal without a plan is a wish.
Correct. I, however, have a list of things that I must do. Must. Not should do. We always say I should. I should lose weight. I should exercise. I should meditate. We wind up shoulding all over ourselves. When we say I must, that's when things change. So I have a list of things I must do. Before I ever get out of bed, I must, before reaching for my phone, talk with someone that I call my higher power, right? And I say, how can I be of service today? And I go through a number of things before I ever even get out of bed. And then there's other musts that I must do, including my gratitude list, including being of service to certain people, wishing everybody a happy birthday. I go to Facebook and I reach out because I'm sending love to people and it's keeping me in contact with those I haven't seen in a while. There are certain things that I do on a daily basis that I must do for myself that keep me spiritually fit. It's like my armor, my spiritual armor. If I don't do that, we go back to stinking thinking.
I love that term. And I think it's very applicable to what a lot of lawyers do on a daily basis, the collective misery. People going to law school and deciding, I don't like practicing law, I'm going to go do something else. Great background, but,
It's not for everyone. I'm still saying the minute I leave this profession, I will find an easier piece because I have to work at it. I'm fighting with people. I'm relying upon prosecutors to give me dates to go to court, or else if I said it, they say, oh, you didn't notice me. I'm relying upon judges in their ruling. People can have an impact on my life. It's really rough. So I get why people say, I'm going to go over here and do something else. I get it. But I still find such joy in being of service that it works for me as long as I stay aggressively involved in maintaining my spiritual health. Otherwise, it is rough.
It is rough. But you're still at it. So what's your exit plan? You're going to work a few more years and retire? You're going to die at your desk? What are you going to do?
I don't have a plan, meaning if you're enjoying it, then it's not really work. Like, I love this. I love being able to help. What I've done over the years is I've had the luxury of picking and choosing my cases. So, what used to be a line is now the truth. When someone comes in here, I'm interviewing them as much as they are me, determining whether it's a fit for me. Do I want to help this person? Is this a fit for me? If the person has unrealistic expectations, or they're so knee deep in their narcissism or addiction, I don't know, unless they want help, I don't know that I want to be around that. So I select my cases very carefully, and that's it. I have fewer cases, and I just have the luxury. I have the practice that I designed over 30 years ago. I'm very grateful.
In addition to completely reprogramming your brain, which is, I just find amazing.
I'm a work in progress. You're never there. You don't ever fully listen, because people say, oh, look at you, Mr. Happiness isn't happy. Yeah, at any given moment, when somebody's crumpling their Twizzler wrapper, when I'm trying to watch the movie, or they're on their phone and that bright light is in my face, I am triggered. Or it's just a little dab of perfume. You don't have to empty the bottle on your neck. Come on, and sit next to me on the plane. I'm triggered. I'm human. But I've got tools these days to help me through those moments.
Yep. Well, Mark, I want to thank you for coming on to our podcast. You make a great appearance, and you have a great message. And I hope that continues, because I think that guys like you are few and far between, or people like you, I should say, few and far between. So keep spreading the love and spreading the word and spreading happiness.
It's my privilege. It's my dharma, my purpose in life. And it brings me joy. So every day that I can be of service to my clients, to my beautiful wife, my sweet 3 children, to my dog, Peace. We're getting another dog, by the way. My wife says when our youngest leaves the house soon, we'll be empty nesters. So we're bringing in another golden doodle named Quiet. So we will have peace and quiet in the home.
That's
true
wonderful.
Story. We're really naming our dog Quiet. I don't know.
It sounds like a great fit. Brilliant idea by your wife.
It's stupid. Then you're left after the chuckle with a dog named Quiet. But she said, you'll call him Q. All right, I digress. You can wrap up. Sorry.
Maybe that's her way of telling you to stop talking.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. Yeah, so that's a wrap for today. Mark Eiglarsh, thank you so much for joining us. I find you very uplifting, and thanks for spreading your positive message to my audience. I would love to have you back in the future. And one last thing, oh, by the way, if you ever want to go into the coaching business, give me a call. You can help a lot of people that way too.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Okay, man. Be well. Thanks.
Take care.